So welcome everybody. We're going to get this thing started.
You know, a notion out there that things will even out. You know, some orders you'll win on, some you'll lose on, it will even out. Well, I tell you, it's not true. And issues like the one you just mentioned could be easily prevented by having a set of rules in the back end to essentially inform or stipulate what's happening in the front end. The customer doesn't necessarily have to know what's happening because they're seeing what they're seeing. They're seeing their own individual experience.
Yeah, and I would back and say the same thing. From the experience of the customer, if I'm coming from Alaska or Guam or Hawaii, why don't I just receive a different experience than if I'm coming from one of the 48 states? Or even you could get much more granular. If there are specific cities or zip codes that cost more for you to ship to, then you could deliver them a different experience so that they know and they don't feel that they're being treated differently. They're just going to have their one unique experience for them that will accurately reflect the information that you want to provide.
I'll add a brief thing to that is that once you have that information on people, maybe through the sign-up process or through some sort of gathering of geo-IP information based on where they're opening emails, assuming that they've signed up for them, then you can use that to target them differently. So whether it's through a welcome series or once you gather that information to say, oh hey, we recognize that you're in Alaska or Guam or Hawaii. Did you know that blah, 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 we're not just like everyone else who has no clue how much it's going to cost to ship to your area. If you had a list of checkboxes of like 100 different features that you wanted, and it was MailChimp next to Bronto, next to the 200 other companies that generally do the same thing, like there's so much feature parity across our industry. Like, we have automation, they have automation to some extent. We have segmentation, they have segmentation to some extent. So it's more about the sophistication of those features. So you can segment with MailChimp, but what are you segmenting on? Is it someone's address, their geography, and maybe a customer type? Are they a direct consumer customer or a business? In many cases, it's not much beyond that. So that's one area where a lot of value comes into play. For apparel retailers in particular, the ease of segment, and this may still not be totally relevant, but the ease of gathering and then segmenting on men versus women. So there's one of our clients, they're a shoe retailer out of the UK. When they segment based on gender, the conversion rates on those messages are 5 times higher than when they just send a general blast out to the entire list. It's not necessarily impossible with MailChimp, but it's just how easy is it to do. And then with automation, I won't go on for too long, but then with automation, almost every company has a welcome message, but how easy is it to turn that into a series? And how easy is it to turn it into a series that reacts based on, is this person a customer already? Have they made a purchase before? Because if so, they're probably already familiar with us, and maybe we want to focus on teaching them things about the brand that we wouldn't teach someone who hasn't made a purchase before. But in terms of what's opened, at least across our client base, which is probably 90 to 95% e-commerce companies and retail companies, is across our client base, we average, it goes anywhere between like 19.5% and 21%. So some of our clients see an open rate much higher than that. Some of them have an open rate that's lower, but average is right around 20.
Change the topic to something that we're really focused on at mediaspa, which is staying 6 months, 12 months ahead of the market. Because everything we do, e-commerce in general, moves extremely fast. And if you're not a little bit ahead, you're ultimately behind. So if you guys could, in each of your verticals, talk about what's coming. What's the future of email testing and shipping going to look like in a year or 2 years, or however far your crystal ball will let you see, and take it as Whoever wants to go, just chime in.
All right. I would say to your question, a couple things are top of mind from a shipping standpoint. I would say the first thing we're seeing more and more of with regards to international cross-border shipping, that's one of the hottest things that retailers who sort of nail down domestic and are looking even to our neighbor Canada, right? The number one country that we shop from US merchants is Canada, and that's one of the key items to get right. And we're working on finalizing what we call having your landed cost, which means your duties and taxes in the cart, which is key to helping customers transact. Because if you live in Canada, France, Australia, you name it, it's very difficult for you to make a decision or an informed decision to buy that item because you might actually be taxed more than the product cost. So that's one thing to keep in mind.
You explained this to me. We were working through a client issue
Absolutely.
recently, right?
Absolutely.
If you haven't solved this, you could deliver the product and
They can reject it,
Right.
and it will not be pretty. And the other thing I would say is, if you are, and you mentioned Amazon before, if you are in a business where you have physical locations, consider getting as closer as possible to the consumer, which means same-day delivery is becoming very big. I'm sure you all hear about anywhere from Uber Rush to Deliv to those kind of players, and we integrate with some of them to enable that proximity to consumer and shortening the time to delivery.
do you think we've gone too far in that direction? Like, do we need all of these things in an hour? Does it make sense?
You know what? I think at this point the train has left the station. So does it make sense? Maybe not, but people still want it.
We've
So-
advised clients against it, and they say, hey, we need Postmates integration, and we need, Deliv. And
I think the market might go, up and scale back a little bit, as with any innovation. But I think at this point, when you see the Masons of the world and the, other behemoth internet, companies doing it, people want to get
I see it if
with
it's
a trend.
if it's an impulse item or it's a piece of fashion apparel that you need for some event. Yes, if it's paper towels, no,
Yeah.
right? So.
I mean, you need to know your customers and you need to know their need state when they come to purchase your item. If you're, in apparel, maybe you want to have it. And
What about the other guys looking into the crystal ball?
So in today's world, we're testing and we're trying to find the right content that works for the majority of your customers. 3 years from now, and what we're starting to happen is by personalizing the experience, and that means using data from in-store, using data from emails, from your behavior on a website, from social, from every aspect of your life, from texting, that we can treat you specifically differently when you come to websites or use mobile apps. And I think 3 years from now, the difference is going to be that when I walk into a store on Fifth Ave and I go over to the men's dress shirt section, that when I bring up on my phone as I'm leaving and I go to their homepage, they're showing me men's dress shirts because they know I'm interested in that. So it's going to be, and the work that's going to be done over the next 2 to 3 years is we have a ton of data. We've done a really good job. We've created a lot of data the past couple of years. It's combining it and using it effectively.
I talked to some folks, some other competitors in the space that I won't mention, who are really focused on and thinking about in the future predictive segmentation, right? So you have experiments or tests that you want to run that right now we all have to think about, hypothesize, create a testing plan. But with all that data that we're collecting, we'll have the opportunity to prognosticate what the right experiment is without manually doing it, taking one of the manual elements out of testing.
Yeah, and I think we think of it one step farther, a little differently, and that was from an experiment point of view. But what we're collecting and the data that we're using is now starting to identify automatically and predictively the different types of users that are coming to your website or the different types of buyers. So I might go to a website and I think, oh, they have men shoppers and women shoppers, but really there are dozens of different types of buyers, and the data and the analytics will be able to identify those personas better than humans can.
Right, because we're only as good as we segment, right? Ultimately, you can if you A/B test the world, you're going to get one result, but if you split that into actual segments of who these people are, you may get very different results.
Each person deserves their own experience. I mean, we've all been frustrated on a retail website before, so we all want something differently. So now we need to find out what that is, and then we can deliver it.
Maddie, what's my email inbox going to look like in 3 years?
It'll probably be just as cluttered as it is today. So my response is kind of similar to Brandon's, but I'll start off by quoting one of my colleagues. I heard him say this recently on a call, and I thought, like, ooh, I have to remember that. So he said, data for the sake of data is the pitfall of the modern marketer. So like, there's all this information coming at us, and we want to know, like, where people are coming into our stores, what items they're buying, what they're browsing on the website, you know, what their middle name is, and all these different things. And it's so valuable to have, but there's, in many cases, still a gap between all this wealth of information and knowledge you can have and actually putting it to work. So I think from an email perspective, like there will be some really cool new things, but I think a lot of it will be getting better at using the information that a retailer and e-commerce company can collect. So right now, we make it really easy to do things like segment on their brand preference and who they are and what they purchased and what they browsed on the site. I think in the future it'll be even more easy to target people based on like what's their return rate. Because I almost never return anything just because it's kind of a pain in the butt to me and I don't want to deal with it. But then some people I know return half the stuff they order, so maybe we need different experiences.
Absolutely.
Or
Yes, my territory.
yeah, it's a little plug over here. Or like Brandon was saying, maybe I was in your brick and mortar store a few days ago, so I get a different email experience than somebody who's never been in one of your stores. So I think it'll be just continuing to make using information like that just a much easier, much more pleasant experience.
I wondered if each of you could give us some parting tips, what you think merchants should be thinking about if you had to boil down the great sum of all the pain points that you've observed. What should people be doing in shipping? What are the and for each of you in turn?
All right, fair enough. I would say number one, consider using more than one carrier. That's one thing that sounds pretty trivial in other parts of the world, but in this country, it seems like most everybody is using a single carrier. I want to say about 60% of retailers are just using one carrier, and opening yourselves up, having a portfolio as you do in other parts of your lives is advisable. Number two, I would say, if you touched upon it, Maddie, is get returns right. And by getting returns right is make it easy to understand. That goes back to you. Make the website clear on what the return policy is and make it easy to return. Not for the sake of actually returning it, because many people out there are like Maddie and we love them. And they won't return, but just the peace of mind, knowing that you can return, goes a long way. And that can actually be the differentiator between converting or not. So get returns right. I would sum it up there.
Thank you.
From my point of view, it doesn't matter what part of the business that you're discussing when you're selling products online, for example. We encourage people to test as many ideas as possible. Get everyone in your organization involved. And there's not one answer that's going to work for everyone. So the more you can test, the more people that can contribute ideas. And instead of arguing over, oh, should we release this product or should we design it this way? Running a test and letting the data decide, not only do you get a higher ROI, but you're able to become more efficient and you're able to include everyone in your organization. and everyone feels equal, and that spurs more ideas and better ideas. So my encouragement to everyone here is, if you don't personalize and don't test, or even if you do it often, is to get everyone involved and to use that data to encourage people to continue to come up with good ideas, and eventually you'll find a solution that works best for you.
I'm going to make a comparison to e-commerce versus brick and mortar, but I think hopefully this is relevant whether you have brick and mortar or not. But I think if you can try to make email marketing or the experience more like what we all want the experience of a brick and mortar shopping session to be like, that can pay dividends. So somebody walks into your store, do you ignore them, or do you say, hey, kind of nudge them with a little bit of information, figure out what they like, find out more about them. Don't necessarily follow around communicating with them every minute or every second, but teach them about who you are. Something I observe quite often is signing up for people's emails, and I either don't get anything, or I get a really plain notification that says, hey, do you want to subscribe to our emails? That's like if I walked into a store and there was an extra set of doors and there's a guy there like, do you really want to come in here? And same thing with collecting information. We were talking about brand preferences. If I go to Dick's Sports Authority, Paragon around here, and I'm buying shoes, hopefully they would ask what the purpose is for me buying shoes. What brand preference do you have? Oh, you're a runner. What kind of style of running do you do? Is it trail? Is it track? Is it something else? There is another variety. And if I pick something up and I'm looking at it for a few minutes and then I put it back on the shelf, like someone in a store should notice that and come up to me like, oh, what was wrong with that? Were you looking for anything else? Did you have something else in mind? And there are parallels to what you can do with email marketing as well. So you might not ever have a brick and mortar store, but you can think, what would that experience be like? And how can I make this channel a bit more like that?